Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for being here with us this afternoon. I'm very honored to have the presence for this talk of two very special persons that were closely involved with Salvatore Scarpitta. And I introduce first Not Vital, which is our Swiss artist that has been long time very close with Salvatore Scarpitta. Thank you, Not, for being here with us in Basel today, as I know that you take the train just to here. And I wanted to introduce also Luigi Sansone, who has been the editor of the Catalogo of Scarpitta, and is long-term friends for more than 30 years, and actually is the responsible of the archive of Scarpitta. So thanks to the passion and devotion of this very long-term professional relationship with Scarpitta, this year in Art Basel, we are very proud to present Scarpitta Racing Cars at Art Basel, which is a section in feature presented by Tornabuoni Gallery, who published this book, where the archive provided to publish many iconographic documentation of the period of the racing cars of Scarpitta. Many of them were not published in the past, so we are very excited about. And also there is a new contribution by Luigi Sansone on this specific aspect of Scarpitta cars. So this afternoon I would like to start to make the lecture lively and easy, to divide and to introduce how Scarpitta arrives to the cars, and just maybe asking Luigi to point out the different moments. So Scarpitta was first based in America, Los Angeles, where he grown up until 36. Then he moved to Italy from 36 to 58, 57, and I will ask Not Vital some anecdote on this moment. And then he decided to come back to America, where he basically became stable since then until his death. So, Luigi, can you tell us about the passion of the racing car at the beginning of the life of Salvatore?
Yes, of course. Well, Salvatore Scarpitta was born in New York City, but when he was 6 months old, the family moved from New York to Hollywood, near Los Angeles. And Salvatore told me that when he was a young boy, around 1930-31, he heard on the hills noises, which were the motors. There was a racing track not too far from where he lived. So for Salvatore, those noise was not noise, but was music for him. So he started to attend the racing cars every Saturday, and he met many pilots, many drivers. And with some of them, he became a friend. So in 1936, the father, Salvatore's father, decided to send Salvatore to study in Italy at the Academy of Fine Arts, first in Palermo and then in Rome, where he graduated in 1940. But in 1940, there was, the outbreak of the war, so Salvatore couldn't go back to the United States. And he lived in Italy until 1958, when he met the famous gallery owner, Leo Castelli. Leo Castelli visited his studio in Rome, and he said to Salvatore, Salvatore, you have to come back to New York City, and I will present your work at my new gallery. Indeed, Salvatore, in December, as Mirta said before, December 58, went back to the United States, and he had a show in January 59. With Leo Castelli, he showed in many one-man shows, many times, and many group group show. Salvatore started to do drawings of pilots and drivers and racing cars back in the 30s. In this catalog, there are some drawing that Salvatore made in 1934. So finally, when he went back to America and he had some money, he started building some of the cars that we'll see on the
images.
On the images, some are published in the book, but those were not real car to race with. Okay, they were fake car. Some were completely fake. He found objects around, the street, and he built cars. Only in 1984, with the support of Leo Castelli, he built the first racing car, and he started to race in Pennsylvania until 2007 when he died. So some of those pieces of cars, Salvatore put it in the paintings. There are some paintings from 61, 62, 63 where you see parts of the car incorporated in the painting. So this passion Salvatore had it from when he was a child until he died in 2007.
Can I ask you a specific question, which is maybe also an anecdote to come back to Italian moments, because obviously for him, he declared in many interviews during the years, and there is a very special one he gave to this Italian art critic, Carla Lonzi, in the 60s, when he describes why he wanted to come back to his dream of as adolescent. But he said that it took him a long time before to arrive to the real object, which is the car. So coming back to the Italian relationship with the generation before the pop artists, when Salvatore arrives in Italy in 1936, he was very close friend with all these Italian artists like post-war that were around. Just to give you an example of Turcato or Dorazio, that maybe was the well-known Italian artist. And Dorazio was the one who really supported Scarpitta and introduced Leo Castelli to his studio. And there is a beautiful anecdote that I would like you to tell the public, which is really important to understand Scarpitta. When he was a boy, he told the story of the trees that then he was telling to his friends in Rome. Can you tell us?
Well, Salvatore was a brilliant storyteller. When I arrived in New York, just after Rome, where I had a circus, and I knew I could make no money from this circus, and it was called the non-profit circus. The person who showed me how to blow fire gave me 5 catalogs to give to his friends in New York. One was Scavullo, the other one was Andy Warhol, the other 2 I don't remember, but one was for Salvatore Scarpitta, who I didn't know. So I went to Salvatore Scarpitta, and actually he kidnapped me in his studio. I became his assistant. And the reason, probably there are 2 reasons. I mean, Salvatore had no brothers. He was married 3 times, had daughters, and being like Sicilian and half Russian, I think he needed a son. And I kind of like became, actually, he adopted me almost. This is one thing. And the other important thing is he needed an audience, because Salvatore, growing up in Hollywood, was very much into the movies. And so he didn't have an audience. I was his audience, because pretty much no one was coming to the studio. I think there was not even a bell downstairs at 868 Broadway. People would shout, Salvatore, and maybe he would look down and let people in, but mostly we were alone in this studio. Certain people were working on the cars. I was his assistant. I didn't have to do nothing but listening to his stories. So one story, sometimes it was like, you could believe them, but sometimes you thought it was like fiction, One story is that he had a fight with his father, and then he climbed a tree outside of Hollywood. And he felt that's okay up there. So like he spent the night up there, and his sister gave him food the next day, and he said, okay, I'm going to stay up here. And he became the tree-sitting champion for about
34 days.
34 days, but like also for more than 34 years, you know. I mean, he became the tree-sitting champion till the 90s or something. He goes to Rome, and he tells this story in Piazza
Del Popolo,
Piazza
di
del
Barrosato,
Popolo, and he did not only, of course, met artists. I mean, he also met writers, and he met Italo Calvino. He tells the story to Italo Calvino, and Italo Calvino writes the Barone Rampante, Baron in the Trees, came from Salvatore. So when he was telling these things, I thought like, yeah, Salvatore, you know. But like, it was always true. Unfortunately, I have a photograph of that, but I forgot, like in Saint. But he was amazing. His stories were so fantastic, and I was the audience.
And also in Rome, in those years, in the 50s, when he started to do his most significant paintings with the bondage, that was 57 and 58. And during this period, he shared the studio with Saint Wombley in Rome. Where Saint Wombley arrived in Rome during this legendary trip, he was invited to Salvatore Scarpitta, and they shared the studio for a while when Salvatore was doing these very important and iconic paintings that I would like Luigi to introduce. And when Sai as well was doing some of his most important paintings in Rome. And then maybe you have to tell us some story about. So I will start to ask Luigi to describe this first bondage and the relationship with the cars. Mm-hmm. And then let's go to the relationship with the artist.
Well, as Mira said, Salvatore Scarpitta started to do the bandage painting in 57. And in April of 58, he had a big show alla Tartaruga, which at that time was a very famous gallery. And the owner was Plinio De Martis. And that show made history, because that night at the exhibition there were Maffei, D'Orazio, Turcato, Moravia, and it came to visit the show also Piero Manzoni. And Salvatore in that show had all bandages were monochrome, white. And Piero Manzoni saw those paintings and he said, wow, Salvatore, these works are really new, something very, very new. And Salvatore said, Piero, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm doing experiments, okay? And this was in April 58. A few months later, Manzoni did the monochrome show at the Pater Gallery in Milano, okay? And this was told me by Piero D'Orazio, who was a very important painter and writer. And he told me also about the story of Lucio Fontana, Concetti Spaziali, you know, the cat that slashing the canvas. Piero said, I remember in 57, I accompanied Leo Castelli and Frederick Kissler, the famous architect, in the studio. At that time, Salvatore made bandages with cuts in the canvas, but Salvatore cuts were outside the opening. And he said Fontana in 57 didn't make the cuts yet, you know, the slashes. Piero D'Orazio started to make those slashes in 58. Piero D'Orazio said, a few months after the visit in the studio, in 58 I went to Milano, and for the first time in the studio of Fontana I saw the famous Concetti Spaziali. And Piero D'Orazio said, Luigi, one day, if you do a show on Salvatore, I would like to write an essay on this, okay? And in 98, I made a show on the Lago Maggiore in Italy, and there are 3 pages of Piero D'Orazio who describes that visit in the studio of Scarpitta with Lucio Fontana. So, I mean, these are strange episodes. You can believe it or not, but I got this news by Piero Dorazio, which was a witness, a real witness at the time. When Salvatore went back in the States, as I said before, he started to include in the paintings pieces of cars. There was a racing accident in New Jersey. Salvatore went on the racing and he picked up few fragments from the pavement.
On the real accident.
Sì. And he included those pieces in the painting. So, and the one thing of Salvatore, he started doing rapping in '57, and he did this all his life. Even the sleds that he started making in '74, which were exhibited at Leo Castelli in '75, all the sleds have bandage all around. So this was really Marco Salvatore Scarpitta, which he made all through his life. Okay.
And I wanted to ask not this episode that he mentioned to me, because I was very curious to know how happened that Twombly and Scarpitta divided the studio in those crucial years in Rome.
I think it was just a coincidence. By the way, I mean, so this is typical Salvatore, you know? He would say, Manzoni came to the show, saw the paintings, and says, "Can I also do it?" Salvatore said, "Do it." You know?
Well, he said in other
I mean,
words,
it was
but
like
I cannot repeat it. But, okay.
But like, what he said about Twombly was that they were sharing the studio. The studio had a wall in between, but the wall didn't go all the way up to the ceiling. And from time to time, Sai would throw a rose to his
on the other
part.
side.
But actually, that was it.
And
Because like in all the time I was there, he never, no artist actually came to visit him. He stayed in his studio or he spent the time at home, but like he really had not a big relationship to other artists. I know he loved Friedrich Kiesler. He liked very much Franz Klein. De Kooning was his great friend because he bought a sled and so he could continue. But like that was about it, you know. I mean, I think like we could maybe divide his work in three parts. Okay, first are the paintings, the wrapped paintings, which of course came from the war because he would talk a lot about the war. And I think they're very much like shields in a way. Then came the sleds, and he was very, very knowledgeable, and he really adored and liked and knew all about American Indians. And the sleds actually came from Eskimo, probably, okay? And then came the cars.
And this is also an aspect I wanted to make clear for the audience, the passage, because also Scarpitta describes in his very, very precise words how when he decided to come back in America in '59, he had the first show at Castelli. At that moment, it was extremely important for every artist to have a show at Castelli because this was the way to have an introduction into the heroic world of New York. And in a way, it was a difficult decision for him to come back to America. He said in an interview later in 2000, when he mentioned his moments with Twombly, he said something that was very, very precise. He said, you know, we are, as a human being, we were going very well together. He was very much looking at what Bob Rauschenberg and Jasper Jones were doing, even if they were on the other side of the ocean. And I was aware of that. But then when he came back to the United States, Scarpitta was immediately recognized, and there's some his letters when he said that he became friend and very much appreciated by de Kooning, and that's something I wanted to tell and ask you how it happens.
Well, yes. I found a letter that Scarpitta wrote in 1959 to Plinio de Martis, the owner of La Tartaruga. And in 59, Scarpitta said, "Dear Plinio, in few days, de Kooning will arrive in Rome. Please take him by hands and make sure that he visits Rome." So this was in 59. They were very, very close friends. And in many interviews, Salvatore said that he considered de Kooning one of the best American artists of the 20th century. There were a lot of respect between the two artists. When Salvatore did a show at Leo Castelli in 75, de Kooning bought a sled directly from Leo Castelli, and the sled today is in the foundation, in the de Kooning Foundation. So they were very good friends. But he was friends also with Franz Klein.
Which was
Franz Klein, de Kooning, Marcarelli.
Yeah.
He met Marcarelli in 1948 in Rome, and then they met again in America. So he was very involved with the people from the abstract American abstract expressionism. Mm.
Yeah, and also what was fascinating with him was that he was very much opposed to pop art, because it was a moment where he said, well, I mean, the cars you're doing could be pop art. He said, not at all. He was really very much against. And I was actually, I brought the sled to de Kooning in Long Island. And then I just stayed on. Salvatore had to come back to New York always, because with his dog, and he was always this dog. Everything was his dog, right? So I stayed on for like 1 week at de Kooning, and I had just arrived in America, and that was so important for me to be able to spend the whole week with de Kooning, who would ask me, "What about the yellow? Do you believe that's great in the painting there?" And like I was just like, it was phenomenal. Anyway, but. Actually, he was very much his own. I mean, he was like, he didn't have much information. He didn't give much information also to the outside. He was really like working on his work and not...
and also to mark a passage. So after 59, he arrives in America. He did his first important show at Leo Castelli. Then he started to work until mid-60s on his paintings. And in 64, there is a moment where Scarpitta decided to stop to do paintings. These are very, very interesting comments that he reports during a Leo Castelli show of his paintings. He was listening to a conversation of some young people. And these people were saying something about, you know, those paintings, like...
a very dramatic.
A very dramatic, a very tragic, that really tells you about the spirit and the tragedy of the 50s. And something like that in 66, in 64, had a very, very special meaning for someone that was not of the same generation of the pop art, but was obviously considering pop art being in America. And I wanted to ask you your point of view about that, because since then he started to work on the cars, and this was a big shift.
Indeed, in 64, 65, he stopped doing paintings for a certain period, for about 4 or 5 years. And he built the first racing car in 64, which is named Regio Jack. Okay, the car seems real, but it's completely made of wood and pieces he found in the street, completely fake. The car now is at the Museum of Modern Art in Torino. And Regio Jack was a pilot of Afro-American origin. The Salvatore met in back in
It
the
was
terrace
great to
in California, and Jack was not permitted to run in the official racing tracks of America because of discrimination. So Salvatore in '64 made the first car dedicated to this Afro-American pilot. And since then, he built other cars in 65, 64, 66, until 69. And one small car, the Salvatore called the Midget, La Macchina Nano, the Midget, is dedicated to Christopher Castelli, who is the son of Leo Castelli. So when he was born, Salvatore gave to the young boy, the boy, this racing car, which is completely real. Yes, it's there. It's dedicated. There is the writing on the side. And then he stopped making racing cars. He built sleds in the 70s. And finally, in '84, with the support of Leo Castelli, built the first real racing car. And every Saturday, as Novital knows perfectly, he ran in Pennsylvania and in Maryland.
Can we stop on this image? Because this is a very important image that you can comment, yes. Luigi. Because
this is one of the first real one that he built, and there is on the side it's written Leo Castelli Art, who was the sponsor, and then on the Baron Niccoli, who is the gallery in Parma. And this car was showed at the Biennale of Venice in 93.
93. But before 93, he did 2 exhibitions at Castelli with the racing cars. And then in 72, he sent some of these racing cars to Venice. I don't know if we have the images now.
Okay, this one is that's Venice.
That's Venice. That's
Piazza San Marco.
And this was quite impressive because at that moment it was totally unusual and it was very difficult. Also, Celanti wrote about.
They were also the first cars ever to enter Venice.
Venice.
Yeah, and apparently this is when Castelli always loved very much and supported Scarpitta as an artist since the very beginning, and even during all his racing car careers, but also in Italy.
It wasn't so easy. Okay, it wasn't so easy for Leo Castelli. I remember. I mean, he was like, he didn't know exactly what he was doing. He supported him. Sal would say, okay, he would go and talk to Leo Castelli about it. He never went to a race. Yeah. And then he made a movie called Message to Leo, to get him actually involved in that. But it was kind of like a different world for Castelli. He always supported him, though. And that's wonderful.
This was the time when artists were not as rich as they are today. And in order to survive, sometimes Ileana Sonnabend and Leo Castelli, they started to give a small, how do you say, a small stipendio?
Not Ileana Sonnabend.
Not Ileana, maybe not
they
Ileana.
They didn't have a very good relationship.
But Leo supported Sal Scarpitta all his life.
Did,
and he was saying that he didn't ask anything, just because he was not a very technical person about the racing, but he was only asking Scarpitta, how did we succeed? Did we win?
And you see there is also number 59. Yeah. That's the year he went to America. That was a very, very important number for Sal. It was everything he signed was 59. So.
Okay, there we see Salvatore Scarpitta as a pilot. And on the wing, you see 59, the number, which is 1959, when he went back to the States and met Castelli. So for Scarpitta, 59 was his lucky number.
But also what we have to tell is actually, Sal never raced physically. I mean, we would go to these are dirt track races, which take place in Pennsylvania and so on. I mean, he always had his pilots. he tried sometimes, but he was, of course, like he was too old, or like, I don't know, he was actually not able to really race and compete. But always sitting on top of his truck
Screaming.
and seeing this enormous dust in the air, and Salvatore screaming out loud.
Yeah.
And how many, I wanted to ask a very simple question for the audience, which is not maybe so involved in this technical aspect. How many cars he started and how many cars he transformed during the career? Because these had also symbolic of value for him.
Well, of the cars left are 6 or 7. I don't remember now. 6 or 7 are left. Many were destroyed during the racing, and from the ruins, from the wreck, he made the installation. Okay, and there is one in the catalog. Probably we'll see it on the wall. There was Kenny Adams. Kenny Adams was one of Salvatore Scarpitta drivers. He had a big, that's it, that's one. Okay, that's part of the car which was destroyed, and he, with the bandage, he went all around, okay? Like, I see in that piece Christ on the cross. That's what Salvatore said, la crocifissione. Okay, and that's one of his latest pieces he made in Baltimore at the art school. Okay.
What was also interesting that he always said that he's a painter. I always said, well, I mean, aren't you a sculptor? He said, no, I'm a painter. You see, like on the left here, that canvas is actually used for operations. That's the opening where people operated. So like he would go to the hospital, get that. But it were always paintings.
With the cars, the first thing he started to paint, it was a number when he was a child. His favorite number. He put this.
Yes, he started painting numbers on other people's cars. But he was 11 or 12. He couldn't do anything else but painting numbers or drawing the lion on the side of the cars. That's how he started in 1932, 1933. Okay.
He was very, very articulate. He would speak so many languages. He would start off with Italian, going to English. Sometimes he even spoke Romanian, or like when he was talking about the war, he would have he would speak German. You know, he was so dramatic to be in his studio. It was phenomenal.
Well, he was also an actor. Well, don't forget, Salvatore Scarpitta's mother was an actress in Hollywood back in the 20s. And Salvatore himself was in a couple of films in 1929, 1930. So,
a very important film for him was a film which was done in 1934, I think, called Song of Songs, with Marlene Dietrich. And the father of Salvatore, he was working for MGM. He was like working for the movies, and they needed a sculpture of Marlene Dietrich. So young Salvatore, at the age of 14, he drilled a hole through his father's studio, and he could see Marlene Dietrich naked. Later on, I don't know if you should say this, but like he rescued Marlene from the studio in Hollywood. Month before the house was destroyed by earthquakes, right? But this is again Salvatore. He brought it then to Pennsylvania, had it cast in bronze, but he was still afraid. Does this belong actually to me, or does this belong to MGM? And he told, since you live in Switzerland, take it to Switzerland. That's a safe place. So I had like this sculpture of his father, of Marlene Dietrich.
Yes, and I lost track of this sculpture. I don't know where it is now.
You don't know. It was sent to Italy.
Anyway, in Italy, another thing that I heard that was really funny in '72, after Castelli did one of the first exhibition about the cars, who didn't sell very easily because at that moment it was not very easy to find collectors for the cars. He sent lots of them to Italy in Venice, and also a bunch of paintings, and that's why even the relationship between Scarpitta and Italian artists, but also with Scarpitta and Italian collectors and museums, is still very, very strong, because
it became very strong.
Became very strong.
But Salvatore was very. I mean, I remember the show at Castelli. And actually, it was Robert Rauschenberg who was supposed to have the show, and he was not finished. So said, "Okay, Salvatore, make the show." And Leo Castelli was working, trying to sell a painting in the back of the gallery. Salvatore saw that. He shouted, "This work is not for sale. That's my daughter's." You know, and this was like, God, he could have sold one, but.
This is a different approach to the commercial world. That is a kind of epic story. I would like to ask Luigi some of his souvenir in the Pennsylvania tracks, because I was told that this was really something special with Scarpitta.
Well, I went to Pennsylvania many, many times every Saturday to look at the racing cars. And Salvatore was always excited. I remember that he started preparing for the racing around 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So from the house, we went to the racing tracks around 7 o'clock. Then they start doing le prove. And the racing finally ended around midnight. So after midnight, we went to clean the cars and clean ourselves, because we were all covered with red dust. It was dust, as Novital said before. There was dust all over, because those racing pistes are not made of asphalt, but of
dirt road.
Dirt track. So when you have to imagine 20, 25 cars running at the same time, you could hear the noise miles and miles far away. And there was dust for miles all over the racing.
Even though he was not racing himself, he would race in the city, though. I remember, like, if he would go from his studio up to 89th Street, where he lived, on Park Avenue, he would race his truck. And one day, he arrived at on 89th Street, and he remembered that his dog was still tied in the back of the truck. Vito. So there's always these stories about the dog.
So anyway, I think that our time is almost to finish, but I would like to ask if there's any question in the audience that I would be very happy to submit to Luigi and Not, which are here. And anyway, I would like to thank them for this extraordinary opportunity you gave us. And is there any question about Scarpitta?
Is there a relationship between him and Beuys, Joseph Beuys? Did they know one another? I believe they did.
Okay. Salvatore Scarpitta, he told me that he went to see the show at the Guggenheim, I think in 1975, of Joseph Beuys. They never met, but they have many things in common. Besides, the sled, we know that Joseph Beuys made the sleds. He made an installation with 24 sleds, and he made also a single sled, the multiple. Salvatore made a series of sleds, and Salvatore said, this sled come from my cars. He said, at one point, I took, the wheels off, and those cars became sleds. But besides that, they have also in common the use of some material. Joseph Beuys used the felt. Okay, we know the story when he went down with the airplane. He was recovered by a tribe. Was curated with the grease, with the felt. And Salvatore also used, felt and material, cotton, canvas in his works. And also the grease. Salvatore used also oil. And the oil from Salvatore came from his experience with the racing cars. So there are many things in common, but they never met each other. Okay.
And would you give us a last souvenir that makes us happy?
I just miss him very much.
I think there is a question.
I wanted to know, was there a role between Salvatore and, say, the futuristic movement in Italy, like after the war, say the Marinettis and the others?
That's a good question. Salvatore told me that when Marinetti moved from Milano to Rome, Marinetti lived in Milano and he moved to Rome in 1925. And Salvatore got to Rome in 1936 and he met Marinetti. At that time, Marinetti was almost forgotten, okay? But he used to do serate futuriste. And not too many people attended, this serate futuriste. And Marinetti used to pay 5 lire for the people. He gave money to the people to attend this serate futuriste. And Salvatore was one of them. Yeah. He got the money to attend the serate futuriste in Rome. And Salvatore met Pippo Rizzo. Pippo Rizzo was a futurist painter from Palermo. When Salvatore came to Italy, he went first to the Academy of Fine Arts in Palermo, where Pippo Rizzo was teaching. From there, he moved to Rome. And he was also a friend of Roberto Melli. Roberto Melli was a very famous artist at the time. And Roberto Melli was a futurist in 1914-1915. And he was a very close friend of Salvatore Scarpitta. So there were contacts between Scarpitta and some of the latest futurists. And some people consider Salvatore Scarpitta, thanks to the racing cars, one of the latest futurists. Okay, the velocity, the car. Don't forget that the opening of the Manifesto Futurista starts with the car. Marinetti says that the car is as beautiful as la Samotrace, la vittoria
di Samotrace.
So there are many points in common between Salvatore and the futurist.
In the beautiful catalog that Luigi Sansone wrote of Catalogo Resonated has so many bibliographical references that put in context the early moments of Scarpitta in Italy and all his relationship with all the Italian artists from the previous generation to the second generation, because he was really in between the two generations, and this is something forgotten. There's a book.
Well, as Mirta said, Salvatore met all the important artists at the time. He was very close of Alberto Burri. And there is a letter, an interview where de Kooning says, Fontana made wounds, ferite, wounds, but Salvatore curates them with the bandage. And this is a sentence by de Kooning.
I think that we can close with this, unless you have to add anything else or some other question from the audience. Otherwise...
Okay, just one thing. I would like to thank Michele Casamonti,
who made this possible,
who sponsored this beautiful catalog, Valentina Fasan, and Leo Rotatori, which is sitting, I think, in...
Leo Rotatori, which is
and
the
all
collector.
the people that helped in this adventure. And Novitale and Mirta, of course.
Thank you very much for being here.